It was 1967. Illinois State University had recently changed its name from Illinois State Normal University, reflecting a significant change in its mission. Once a relatively small but nationally recognized teachers' college, Illinois State had become a rapidly growing multi-purpose university. Longtime President Robert Bone was retiring, and the university was searching for a new leader capable of guiding the school through unknown waters. The recommendation forwarded to the Board of Governors was for a man who had spent the previous 20 years as a professor of economics and a high-ranking administrator at Indiana University. Samuel E. Braden became the 10th president of Illinois State University. His appointment was viewed by the university community as a fortunate choice. Although President Braden would serve the university for only 3 years, they would be among the most vital and tumultuous years in the school's history. Samuel Braden inherited an institution whose enrollment had grown from 3,000 in 1958 to 11,000 when he joined the university in 1967, and would continue to grow to 17,000 by the time he would leave office in 1970. 4 new residence halls, 2 classroom buildings, and an athletics complex had just been completed. Construction was underway and planning in progress for yet another major classroom building, a significant addition to the administration building, a new food service building, a brand new $19 million student union auditorium complex, as well as another residence hall, this one consisting of 2 28-story towers. In addition to the unprecedented construction, Braden also inherited the task of managing the transition of institutional governance to a new Board of Regents system, while also attempting to revise the campus governance structure amid a growing new student power movement. This was a time of changing curriculum and academic plans. Nearly 400 new programs were launched on President Braden's watch. But this was also a time of economic trouble, a time when the Illinois economy soured. While the president worked diligently to expand facilities and programs and hire new faculty to meet the ever-increasing needs, the state began cutting the university budget. Initially, it was the capital budget, reducing the university's proposals by 2/3. Next, the operating budget was slashed from $7 million to $2 million. Soon after, the governor ordered an additional 10% cut, causing President Braden to begrudgingly order a freeze on all unencumbered funds, faculty and staff positions, travel, and the elimination of the summer session. The university could now expect only about 20% of what it needed to fulfill its planned development as a major multipurpose institution. But budget woes were not the only issues to appear on college campuses in the late 1960s. The 60s were a time when student and faculty activism peaked, when some within the university sought to plunge the school into the troubled waters of the anti-Vietnam War movement, when campus emotionalism, unrest, and disturbances over racial injustice became nightmarish contradictions to the rationality and calm traditionally associated with the academic enterprise. President Braden often found himself at odds with the people in the town who, already experiencing the negative impact of the rapid growth of the university, began to see the students as radicals, plotting the destruction of American institutions. Braden provided a carefully measured response. The steps he took to address the student power movement were neither dramatic nor knee-jerk responses. The president was sensitive to the difficulties and disturbances already occurring on other campuses when students were ignored. Illinois State University never really experienced the turmoil that characterized Berkeley and Columbia, or the tragedy at Kent State. And a great deal of the credit for that good fortune goes to Samuel Braden. But like his counterparts at other universities, President Braden had to deal with the SDS, the Black Panther Party, Vietnam protests, racial incidents, protests against discrimination, marches, rallies, pickets, and acts of vandalism and violence. He encountered sit-ins in his office, student demands, moratoria, and demonstrations, including the infamous struggle over the lowering of the quad flag in honor of the slain civil rights leader Malcolm X, and a town curfew that nearly touched off a full-scale riot. But as each situation arose, President Braden was there, protecting the interests of the university while listening and communicating with those whose interests transcended the social swirl and academic drudgery of traditional campus life. President Braden's resolve had been tested to the extreme. He had faced the worst of times on any college campus with student unrest, terrible budget woes, a growing community apprehension, and a state legislature looking to point fingers while it turned its back on higher education. And yet he found ways to keep the university open and moving forward, adding new programs, building new facilities, and finding ways to address a seemingly never-ending increase in enrollment. Unfortunately for the university, the successes were not enough to overcome the discomfort and growing fear in the president. He did not want his decisions and actions to result in the loss of liberty or life. Samuel Braden informed the board that he wished to return to the life of a teacher. It was startling news. President Braden was viewed as a person of integrity, strength, and accomplishment, a leader who brought the university safely through a most dangerous and trying period. His contributions would not be forgotten. Francis Bud Geigel, a soft-spoken vice president from Northern Illinois University, was named acting president. He was as determined as Braden to protect the university's orderly operations. But fortunately, the predictions for greater campus turmoil and violence proved to be wrong. There were isolated outbursts, but the college youth appeared to have lost much of their fervent interests in the old issues. The reduction of the military draft, the disarray of the radical movement, and high attrition rate of older radical student leaders all contributed to the changing campus scene. Inflation was the new societal issue. Increased tuition and housing costs added to the darkening financial picture. Jobs were becoming more scarce, and unlike the students of the 60s who took for granted the opportunities awaiting them after graduation, those of 1970 and thereafter faced the sobering experience of an uncertain future. The university's budget planners proposed a new $10 million science building, $2 million for new and expanded academic programming, and a 70% increase in operating funds. If granted, the university would again be pointed in the direction of becoming a multi-purpose senior institution. But the board slashed the capital requests and reduced program expansion by 2/3. The operating funds were increased by only 17%, mostly to address increasing enrollment. The board was signaling an end to the rapid expansion of Illinois public universities. On May 28, 1971, the Board of Regents announced the appointment of David K. Birla as the university's 11th president. Birla was a professor and chair of the Department of Communications at Michigan State. He would, he said in a press interview, emphasize management and accountability within an institution he considered alive, healthy, and independent. But President Birla would serve for only 21 months. It would be an unhappy period when higher education was in a state of transition from plenty to scarcity, requiring every university president to make hard decisions affecting the well-being of their institution. Changes came quickly, cutting deeply into hard-won achievements in curricular development, administrative and faculty self-esteem, shared governance, and the collegial structure. Whether the changes were justified or not, Birla's leadership quickly became a controversial matter, attracting opposition and hostility within months. The advent of Birla's presidency coincided with the state board's determination to achieve cost savings from all elements of the state system of higher education. Each school was asked to identify its low-priority activities equal to 15% of its current operating budget. The board gave the schools 1 month to comply, or the job would be done for them. President Birla interpreted Illinois State's mission under the new state plan as a chance to become Illinois' premier undergraduate university, with the principle that what could not be done well should not be done at all. But his review process only worsened the growing anxiety and sense of insecurity. Outright terminations were proposed for many programs, while others were scheduled to be phased out or replaced. Even teacher education would be reduced because of the oversupply of teachers in the workforce. Considerable administrative shuffles were also proposed, including the elimination of student services as a distinct unit. The reaction to Birla's decisions ranged from intense anger to indifference. But disbelief perhaps was the most common response, along with undecided judgment on the leadership abilities of a new president on the job only 90 days. Regrettably, events of the months ahead only widened the distance between President Birla and the university. Birla rejected the concept of the academic senate as a university legislature. He did not allow non-academic vice presidents to participate, and he and the academic vice president would not commit themselves in advance by voting on matters before the Senate. To faculty, Birla's position represented an assault on a time-honored tradition of university governance, and student members saw his attitude a negation of the hard-won recognition of the student power movement. Birla also found strong opposition to his interests in restructuring academic departments into flexible learning centers, where faculty and resources could be more easily transferred to respond to changing societal demands. Back and forth went the discussion until a compromise proposed maintaining academic departments while abolishing college administrative functions. The result was confusion and further division within the university. A final confrontation involved criteria and procedures to determine faculty salary increases. Faculty were comfortable with the system they had helped shape that provided a structured peer evaluation of an individual's performance in teaching, research, and public service. Birla sought substantial alteration of this practice. He made it clear in a policy statement that only meritorious performance would be rewarded, as the board had directed, and teaching would be the most important component of the reward system. The Senate's response was unpleasant. The debate was long and angry, but President Birla made his position unequivocally clear. The board had taken away the faculty's right to determine the matter and had charged him with the responsibility. The Senate begrudgingly and with undiminished ill will adopted a resolution that only somewhat softened the directives. The relationship between the President and the Senate broke down completely after that stormy and bitter meeting. The President generally ignored the Senate thereafter. Even with the controversy and budget constraints, some new academic programs were introduced. 2 undergraduate programs in the allied health areas, a Black Studies program, an Ethnic and Cultural Studies program, a Masters of Fine Arts program, and doctoral programs in mathematics and history all became realities. After a 4-year delay, an $8 million library was started, joined by a large plaza to the nearly completed but much scaled-back Union Auditorium. In 1972, an affirmative action office was established to improve the status of women and minorities and assist in the recruitment of minority faculty and staff. Student life was a mixed bag at best. There were still remnants of the free-spirited 60s, but generally students were turning back to the basics: education and recreation. Drug use was common, and alcohol was the basis for most social interaction. During the early 70s, the town of Normal ended its 115-year history of prohibiting alcohol sales, and the state dropped the drinking age from 21 to 19 for beer and wine. Athletics was also changing in response to the size of the school. The Redbirds had moved up to the university division of the NCAA and was looking to make a name for itself. Whatever the university's long-term advances, they were overshadowed by increasing campus tension and a plummeting faculty morale, attributed to President Birla's leadership. An underground newspaper satirized his activities and lifestyle. Petitions were circulated demanding his resignation, and rumors of improprieties abounded and were repeated with malicious delight. A Pantograph investigation of Birla's entertainment spending, especially for liquor, reflected its shock at his failure to exercise presidential restraint. In late spring of 1973, the university's divided condition reached a crisis stage, ending with President Birla's resignation. The specific issue was the cost and circumstances associated with the construction of a new president's residence. There were details about the house that aroused genuine concern over alleged violations of state law, but for most, the new residence was a symbol of all that had gone wrong. Ironically, Birla did not originate the project that became his Achilles heel. The idea came to life in the expansive days of the late 60s. Birla transmitted his resignation to the board on May 30th. The board officially accepted his resignation 3 weeks later and named Dr. Gene Budig, then dean of the university, to serve as acting president until a permanent successor could be found. In the longer view, President Birla was both a product and a casualty of his times, a transitory figure who served merely to set the stage for a new period in the university's history. On November 15, 1973, Gene A. Budig was named the university's 12th president. It was an agreeable choice, and all elements of the university quickly pledged their support to Budig, who, as acting president, had been able to repair campus morale. Budig represented the new type of university official, whose graduate training and scholarly interests were in higher education administration. He viewed his role as the steward of institutional affairs conducted by others. Budig did not see the situation as a time for retrenchment. Rather, he believed it was a time for reasoned, responsible movement forward. Even with the problems of the previous administration, the university had a remarkable period of quiet advancement. Campus enrollment was holding at 19,000, and there were some modest increases in state funding, all while other state universities were experiencing retrenchment. Budig's first order of business was the restoration of the college structure. Then he turned his attention to central administration, creating the position of provost, recreating the division of student affairs, and establishing a vice president for business and finance. President Budig observed carefully the Senate's procedures, attending its meetings along with the other senior administrators, and including the Senate's executive officer in the weekly meetings of the Academic Administrative Council. Budig regarded the continued growth in enrollment as necessary to the university's success in attracting state funds. He worked vigorously to recruit students from throughout the state. His job was eased somewhat by the increased availability of financial assistance at a time when the national economy was gripped by recession. Returning Vietnam veterans, as well as adults continuing their education, tended to make the student body older. And an increasing number of minority students altered the ethnic composition of the campus population. Campus housing underwent dramatic changes from what prevailed in the 60s. More and more students were compelled or simply wanted to live away from campus. Apartment living became the rage, spurred by desires for greater freedom and flexibility and perceived lower living costs. To protect the financial obligations by which the residence halls had been constructed, the university began requiring that undergraduates live at least 4 semesters on campus. But by 1976, close to 60% of the student body was scattered in a wide circle about the university. The Student Association was challenged by a plethora of organizations with smaller, more cohesive constituencies. There was the Black Student Union, Black Affairs Council, and the Association of Latin American Students as important minority groups. There was also the Council of Greek Societies and the Black Greek Council, formed by social sororities and fraternities that came to life after 1970 when they were officially sanctioned by the university. An equally significant change was apparent in the values of students by the mid-70s. Perhaps reflecting the emotional exhaustion and cynicism of the previous years, these students appeared to focus attention on themselves in search for satisfying personal experiences and relaxation from academic work. Rock music represented a form of personal freedom and emotional high. The new Union Auditorium became one setting for concerts, and Horton Fieldhouse became another, both frequently filled to capacity. But the largest stage of all was the center of campus, where Rites of Spring became ISU's version of Woodstock. The first Rites of Spring was held in May of 1972, a noon to midnight revel that attracted 3,000 people. Each year attracted more and more non-students and produced mounds of garbage and increasing incidents of vandalism. The 1977 Rites of Spring was the largest, with estimates as high as 25,000 people, the most expensive with costs upward of $50,000, and the most destructive, with the quad declared unsafe for a time because of broken glass and beer can rings. It was also the last. While drinking was a serious matter, it was police action against the sale and use of drugs that aroused students in the spring of 1975 in a way reminiscent of the late 60s. It was impossible to determine the extent of drug usage among students, but it was probably no greater than in the public at large. The Multi-County Enforcement Agency, known by its acronym MEG, put undercover agents on campus to gather evidence, resulting in 4 raids and the arrest of many students between December 1974 and May 1975. President Budig became increasingly concerned about the level of drug usage on campus. Stricter rules for the popular rock concerts were established, but the Rites of Spring was the major problem because of its large, sprawling audience. It was decided that the 1975 Rites of Spring would be held in Hancock Field, where admission could be controlled. This was a very unpopular decision among students who thought of the Rites as the most valuable experience of the school year. The situation worsened when Meg swung into action with raids and arrests only 4 days before the truncated rites was scheduled. An anti-Meg rally was held the next day, drawing over 1,000 people and lasting into the evening. Although angry speeches were made and a march through Normal threatened, President Budig, dressed in denim, moved through the crowd to calm the situation. More serious was the unscheduled rites celebration that developed on the quad in defiance of the university ruling against such an event. By evening, over 3,000 people had gathered in the outdoor amphitheater to listen to music, drink beer, and share experiences despite university efforts to send them away. A small bonfire was ignited, which led to a call for the Normal Fire Department, which led to an angry response from the crowd, which led to the shutting off of the only power supply, and the ultimate disbursement of the crowd. While disturbing at times, the drug rock concert issue of 1974-75 proved to be short-lived, though the new drinking habits held on. Perhaps more significant than the changes in student lifestyles were the changes in students' academic interests. The university was still predominantly undergraduate, but with new programs at the master's and doctoral levels, the proportion of students in graduate studies rose to 15% of the student body. Because of the rapid decline in the teacher job market, teaching as a career was abandoned as students sought other interests. At the beginning of the 70s, almost 90% of graduating seniors were prepared as teachers. By 1976, not more than 50% of students chose teaching as an educational goal. The colleges of education and arts and sciences experienced sharp declines in the number of majors, while the undergraduate majors in business and fine arts nearly doubled, with the greatest increase, over 350%, in accounting. Academic planning was again an important consideration, but instead of planning in times of rapid growth or sudden retrogression with panicked urgency, planning could now take place in a relatively calm environment, allowing reasoned, realistic assessment. During President Budig's 4 years, 21 new programs were approved, including 5 new doctoral programs that represented a triumph for departmental development and faculty aspirations that went back to the mid-60s. Even as enrollment grew and new programs were developed, new funding did not keep pace. President Budig pleaded and lobbied the university's case for increased funding with little success. Annual increases from 1973 to 1977 were less than the rate of inflation, resulting in long-term salary problems and delays or cutbacks in maintenance and repairs. Internal budget reallocations and external foundation grants were especially important means by which university development was advanced. The university's own foundation, reconstituted and revitalized in 1973 after a lapse of several years, worked diligently to raise funds to support over 40 merit scholarships and student recruitment efforts. But when all sources and means were considered, the university remained in a delicate budgetary condition. The campus had become an important, not to say profitable, circuit for musicians, artists, theatrical companies, and popular entertainers and lecturers, presenting everything from the vulgar to the sublime. In 1973, the Center for the Visual Arts was completed, expanding studio and classroom facilities and providing gallery space for student, faculty, and visiting collections of art. In 1976 alone, 30 exhibitions of national significance appeared in the new gallery. The 3,500-seat auditorium was also ready for use in 1973, making it possible to stage large-scale symphonic, choral, drama, ballet, and operatic productions. These developments, along with performances and showings by students and faculty, gave added weight to the university's cultural influence in the state and beyond. What Budig's time in office provided more than anything was a stable environment in which faculty, administrators, and students could assess the future, establish goals, and work to realize them. It was during these years that the university seemed to finally attain its goal, established in 1966, of becoming a multi-purpose institution of higher learning. President Gene Budig resigned from Illinois State in 1977 to become the president of West Virginia University. Although the university knew it would miss the leadership of this talented young man, it wished him the best in his new endeavor and readied to welcome its 13th president, Dr. Lloyd I. Watkins.